Think about late 1998 for a second. Not the politics, not the headlines, just the feeling of it. The specific texture of a Friday night when you drove to Blockbuster and stood in the new releases section for 20 minutes, and everything on the wall looked vaguely like something you'd already seen. The disaster movies, the romantic comedies, that particular shade of blue-gray that every late 90s movie poster seemed to use, like the whole industry had agreed on a single color to describe the millennium. You were somewhere between 25 and 35. The economy was doing that thing where it felt almost too good, like the checkout line was always moving and nobody wanted to ask where it was going. TRL was on every afternoon. The multiplexes were packed on opening weekends. And the trailers before the movie were sometimes better than the movie itself. And in those trailers, almost every time it felt like there was this one face, wide-eyed, serious in a way that teenage girls in movies usually weren't allowed to be, a little older than her age in every look she gave the camera. You didn't know her name yet, but you'd seen her. You'd definitely seen her. Her name was Leelee Sobieski, and for about 4 or 5 years, she was everywhere. Not Meg Ryan everywhere, not Julia Roberts everywhere. Something different. Something that felt more like she'd wandered in from a more interesting movie playing in a smaller theater somewhere, and Hollywood had found her and was trying very hard to turn her into something it already knew how to sell. Then she stopped. No announcement, no breakdown, no scandal. No tabloid spiral. She just stopped. And most of us, being busy living our own lives, filed it away somewhere under, whatever happened to her, and moved on. This is the video where we actually answer that question. Okay, 1998, Deep Impact. That's probably the first time most people really locked onto her. The movie was one of those big, earnest disaster films that the late 90s kept producing, the kind where the trailer had an orchestral swell and Morgan Freeman speaking slowly in some kind of celestial catastrophe bearing down on America. You either lined up for it opening weekend or you caught it 6 months later on HBO at 11 p.m. and got more absorbed than you expected. She played Jenny Lerner. Teenager, complicated home situation, all of that. And in a movie full of enormous CGI waves and celebrity cameos, she was somehow the thing you kept watching. There was something almost old-fashioned about how she held herself on screen, not showy, not trying to win you over. Just present. It was the kind of acting where you don't think, that's a good performance. You just think, I believe that person. She was 16 when they shot it. A few months later, she was in Never Been Kissed, Drew Barrymore's rom-com, the one about the journalist who goes back to high school, the one that played on basic cable approximately 900 times between 1999 and 2004. She had a smaller role there, but it put her on a double bill with one of the most recognizable women in Hollywood. The industry was paying attention. And then came Eyes Wide Shut, Stanley Kubrick's last film, Tom Cruise and Nicole Kidman, a shoot that went on for over a year in London, famously strange, and notoriously intense. She had a supporting role. She was 17 in a Stanley Kubrick film, in a story about desire and secrecy and the ugly machinery underneath the polished surface of wealthy adult life. Think about what it means that someone decided that was the right project for a 17-year-old. She handled it. She always handled it. That was the thing about her. She handled everything they threw at her with this almost unsettling composure that made critics reach for the same comparison over and over. The next, Jodie Foster. That phrase showed up so many times in 1999, you almost stopped registering it. The next Jodie Foster. The next Jodie Foster. Like they had a stamp. And then she did something that actually earned it. In 1999, she played Joan of Arc in a television miniseries. And I want to be specific here. Now, because this isn't just she played a historical figure on TV. It was a serious 3-hour production that asked her to carry almost every frame of it. Joan of Arc is one of the most difficult roles in the canon, a teenager who believes in something impossible, who is right in a way no one around her can process, who walks into her own destruction with her eyes open. It's the kind of role that exposes you completely. She was 17. She was nominated for a Primetime Emmy. She was nominated for a Golden Globe. At the ceremony, sitting in a room full of people 20 years older than her, dressed like an adult, carrying herself like one, she was suddenly, undeniably, not a promising face in a movie trailer anymore. She was the real thing. There's a moment a lot of us hit in our 30s, where you look around and realize you've gotten good at something you never really chose. You just happened to be standing there when someone needed it done. The promotions, the praise, the money all make sense on paper. But there's this quiet panic underneath. If this isn't who I am, why am I letting it eat all my time? Leelee Sobieski hit that point earlier than most of us, staring down an award season schedule and bigger, weirder roles, and realizing that the work everyone else called her gift felt to her less like a calling and more like selling pieces of herself. The thing the world wanted more of was the thing she was already trying to grow out of. But in 1999, nobody could see that yet. From the outside, she looked like a person on the exact right trajectory. So what do you do when you're 17 years old, nominated for an Emmy? It's being compared to one of the greatest actresses in American film history, and you already know that this isn't what you actually want to do with your life. If you're Leelee Sobieski, apparently you keep going for a while. Because she didn't leave in 1999. She kept working. She did more films. Joyride in 2001, a thriller with Paul Walker, the kind of genre movie that got decent reviews for a moment and then became a video store staple. The Glass House, same year, a psychological thriller about a teenager who suspects her guardians of something very wrong. She was the lead. She was good. The movies did okay. And she got another Golden Globe nomination in 2001, Uprising, a TV film about the Warsaw Ghetto. 2 nominations within 2 years. The kind of awards record that agents build whole careers around. The kind of momentum that, in Hollywood's logic, you don't walk away from. She kept getting cast, she kept showing up, and through all of it, she carried herself the same way, serious, controlled, not quite playing the Hollywood game the way it expected to be played. She didn't really do the full celebrity circuit. The interviews she gave were a little different, less promotional, more considered. The dresses she chose for red carpets were slightly off in a way that felt like a genuine aesthetic decision rather than a stylist's brief. She wasn't doing the performance of being a rising star, which is itself a performance Hollywood requires, and it made some people uncomfortable in ways they couldn't quite articulate. And then, slowly, without any fanfare, things shifted. This is the part of the story that looks, from the outside, like nothing happening. No headline captured it. There was no Variety exclusive explaining that Leelee Sobieski was stepping back. In the mid-2000s, she appeared less frequently. The roles got smaller or more scattered, a few episodes here, a smaller film there. By the early 2000s, she was doing guest appearances, Drop Dead Diva, The Good Wife, good shows, respectable credits, but not the trajectory everyone had penciled in for her. The industry noticed, the way industries notice things, quietly, without sympathy, with recalibration. The next Jodie Foster coverage dried up. She stopped appearing in the ones to watch roundups, and the audience, most of them, simply moved on to the next face in the next trailer. Here's what actually happened, though, and it's worth sitting with. Leelee Sobieski, and in her own words, not tabloid speculation, not anonymous industry sources, her own documented statements, described Hollywood as a kind of gross industry. She talked about how a significant portion of the roles she was offered asked her to trade on her body and her sexuality in ways that made her feel reduced. She talked about scenes that left her in tears, not because of what the character was going through, because of what the role required her to give up about herself. And she was a teenager when she started. There's nothing mysterious about this, unfortunately. It's structural. The late 90s and early 2000s ran on a particular economy of young women's discomfort. The industry routinely placed teenage actresses in situations requiring adult emotional and physical exposure and treated their unease as part of the overhead. Not a flaw in the system. The system. Eyes wide shut when she's 17, roles in psychological thrillers that asked her to be afraid and watch simultaneously. A whole machine calibrated to sell a version of her that she never signed up to be. She handled it. She kept handling it. until she didn't have to anymore. Because here's the thing that almost every existing story about her gets wrong, or at least gets incomplete. Leelee Sobieski was never primarily an actress. She was a painter. She had been making visual art long before acting gave her any financial foothold. She described acting, in her own words, as a means to an end, a job she was very good at, a job that paid well, a job she did while she was building towards something else entirely. The awards nominations, the magazine covers, at the next Jodie Foster comparisons, those belonged to an industry that had decided who she was. They weren't her self-portrait. They were a painting someone else made of her and then put her name on. Once she had children with designer Kimmel, once the financial ground beneath her had shifted, she made a decision that is genuinely rare at her level of visibility. She stopped. Not gradually, not while leaving the door open. She stopped, changed her professional name to Leelee Kimmel, and redirected her attention toward the thing she had always been working toward. She walked away from the machine that had been funding the life she was trying to actually build. She didn't write a memoir about it. She didn't go on a press tour explaining herself. She picked up a paintbrush and went back to work. Today, Leelee Kimmel is a working artist based in New York City, not trying to be an artist, not exploring a hobby after her acting career wound down. A working artist with gallery representation, solo exhibitions, and an active studio practice. She shows with Serious Galleries, Journal Gallery in Brooklyn, Allman Rec, with exhibitions in New York, Paris, and South Korea. She works in large-scale abstract painting, sculpture, and VR installation. The work gets reviewed. The work is in collections. The work is the thing. When Vice reached out to profile her a few years ago, she agreed to discuss her art and declined to talk about what she called her past life. Not dramatically, not with hostility. Just, that chapter isn't the one that's open right now. In the art world, she moves as Leelee Kimmel, and most of the people who engage with her work have no particular reason to connect her to the face in the Deep Impact trailer. She appears to prefer it that way. She raised 2 children. She stayed out of the tabloids. She built something that belongs to her entirely, under a name that belongs to her entirely. And the wild thing, the thing nobody ever wrote a headline about, is that by almost any measure, she got exactly what she was working toward. She just got there by a route that nobody in that room at the 2000 Golden Globes would have predicted or wanted. At some point in middle age, almost everyone toys with a fantasy of walking away, not in flames, not with a speech, just putting the big life down and picking up a smaller one that actually feels like yours. You imagine the quieter mornings, the absence of certain emails, the way your nervous system might finally shut up for a minute. Most of us don't do it. We recalibrate, we compromise, we tell ourselves the timing isn't right yet, and then the timing never gets right, and somewhere in there the fantasy starts to feel embarrassing, like something you shouldn't admit to wanting. Leelee didn't just daydream that, she did it. She turned down the kinds of scripts other actors would have killed for, stepped off red carpets that would have guaranteed her another decade in the magazines, and went back into a studio space to make work that no one recognized her in. She chose being a mostly anonymous painter and mom over being the next big thing. And the wild part is, by every available sign, she seems genuinely okay with that trade. I've thought about what to make of this story. Because it doesn't fit the template. It's not a tragedy. It's not a redemption arc. She didn't need redeeming. It's not even really a cautionary tale, though the industry she was operating in absolutely warrants caution. What it is, I think, is a rare case of someone seeing the trap early. Most people in Hollywood, most people in any industry that runs on visibility and validation, don't see the trap until they are already in it. They keep reaching for the next credit, the next premiere, the next coverage cycle, and by the time they look up and wonder what any of it was for, the answer is complicated, tangled, hard to walk back from. She looked at it, the whole machine, the nominations and the magazine spreads and the next Jodie Foster projection, and thought, that's not what I'm building. And then she left before it could become what she was. There are roles she never played that might have been something. Films that would have had her name above the title. Awards she might have won. And she said, "I'd rather paint." You can disagree with that choice. You can wish she'd stayed. You can feel a small, legitimate sadness about the performances that never happened. I think that's allowed. But here's the question I keep coming back to, the one I think this story is actually asking underneath all of it. How many of us are still doing the thing the world decided we were good at and have never once stopped to ask if that was ever actually the thing we wanted? Leelee Sobieski asked that question at 25. She answered it honestly. And she's been living inside that answer ever since. That's not nothing. That's not nothing at all.